Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford. He is my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you from different locations here at Lambeau Field as the Packers are in the midst of OTAs, and Wes, 2 weeks of OTAs are in the books, 1 week left to go, followed by the mandatory minicamp to wrap up the offseason program. One topic I wanted to get to that we actually didn't get to on our last show, that was, I guess you'd call it maybe one of the more lighthearted or humorous moments of the offseason program so far, is, in relation to the media, was with the announcement of that whole fair catch rule thing with regard to kickoffs. And then just so happened, Keisean Nixon made himself available at his locker after practice that day. And let's just say he was having a little fun talking about what's a fair catch. I've never heard of that. So I don't think, at least it doesn't seem as though this fair catch rule on kickoffs is going to change number 25's approach back there for Green Bay.
I don't think it's going to change Rich Bisaccia's approach either, from some of the tea leaves I've been reading and hearing. And I'm sure that trickle-down effect has gotten to Keisean too. Hey, listen, I understand the mixed opinions on this. Obviously, Mark Murphy touched on it too in Murphy's Take 5 on Saturday. It's a sensitive issue because I think, first and foremost, as exciting as the play is, as much as it was a real big difference maker for the Packers last year, I still think of Jonathan Franklin. I think of, I believe Sean Richardson was injured on that, a kickoff. It is a dangerous play. It's an inherently dangerous play. As Mark Murphy outlined, it's not just the speed, it's the spacing of the players and the collisions that take place. For that reason, I hate to be the kind of guy that's, saying, hey, take the physicality out of football because it is a physical sport. I understand and appreciate where the league is coming from. To be perfectly honest with you, Mike, I don't know how much XFL you watched this year. I really ended up enjoying their kickoffs a great deal, because it still kept in the component of the kickoff in the kicker kicking the ball off from the 30, 35, wherever it was. It just moved the coverage players closer to the play. It makes the kickoff slower, but it does make you still have to be gap sound and disciplined, or you could potentially end up creasing and breaking for a touchdown. I wonder if that is the ultimate direction this thing swings, because as I've said to you so many times, I'm like, I don't like 4th and 15 at all. I don't trust the officials with it. The last thing I want to see is a defensive holding call resulting in a team getting a fresh set of downs and maintaining possession of the football. I don't care about, well, if they get a 15-yard completion or 20-yard completion or a touchdown, it'd be exciting. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about holding. I'm worried about defensive holding. I'm worried about some obscure subjective pass interference call.
Illegal contact.
Absolutely.
Illegal contact play, yeah.
So given all these various scenarios, I look at the fair catch as the middle ground in all of it. Andy Reid doesn't like the play. No problem. You can coach your kickoff returner to never signal for fair catch. The ball could be anywhere, and you tell them to return it. But some teams like the Packers, before Keisean Nixon, where they were struggling to find a guy back there, it does make some sense, both strategically and from the player safety perspective. As Mark Murphy talked about, it's worth exploring, considering it's an avenue that college football has been using for some time now.
Yeah, and you asked about the XFL part of things. I didn't watch any of the XFL, but I've read and I've seen the highlights in terms of how they've adjusted the kickoff. And I agree with you. I think eventually that is the direction the NFL is going to go, because it keeps the basics of a kickoff return in the game, but you are reducing the speed, the nastiness, so to speak, of the potential collisions. And they'll study the data in the XFL, certainly with regard to injury rates and things like that. I do think it's going to go that way eventually. What I'm not sure about is the other issue that you raised. Then if that's what you're doing and all those coverage guys are already downfield for a kickoff, then what do you do for an onside kick? And maybe it needs to be something where the kicking team has to declare that they're going to try an onside kick, and then they actually are forced to kick the ball on the ground. You can't declare you're going to do an onside kick and then pull a switcheroo and kick a pop-up or kick it deep or something that recreates the dangerous elements of the play. So So those kinds of things that, I think will be in the works here in the NFL over the next several years as they try to get the injury rate on kickoffs reduced.
And even if they would end up, and I agree with you 100% on what you're saying with the onside, but even if, let's say, they would have a pop-up, you still have a returner back there, and you still have the coverage players and the return team closer together. That's the biggest thing in this that I've learned over the last 10 years. Because, dude, trust me, when they pushed up the kickoff from the 30 to 35, however many years ago that was, I hated the idea. I hated the idea of there being more, kickoffs that are just going to be brought for a touchback, and starting at the 25. I didn't like that because it is an exciting play. I grew up with Desmond Howard and Allen Rossum and, these guys that made a lot of excitement out of that. But that being said, as you grow older and you understand the physical safety aspect of this, and that a majority of these plays that have significant injuries are coming off of special teams, I feel like you do need to find an answer, because unfortunately, Mike, you worry about every single player on the field, but let's be honest, when you're talking about special teamers, these are your rookies. These are your first year players. These are some young guys a lot of times that still have their entire careers ahead of them. And I want to see them be able to have those opportunities to be on the respective side of the ball that they desire. And, not just that introductory phase.
Yeah, well, it's a story to watch throughout this season as we see, if the Packers are going to have Keisean Nixon back there, he may not call any fair catches all season long.
I doubt it.
There may be other teams. There may be other teams that'll call a fair catch every single time and just say, hey, we're going to take it on the 25. We're not going to risk a hit, an injury, a turnover, possible fumble, anything like that. So,
but this is why they do it, right, Mike? Because at the end of this year, they'll take all that data. They'll see if it's gone up, if it's gone down, what the returns have been, what have the percentages been, how many touchdowns have there been. They'll take all of that into consideration and make their best move forward. I like the 1 year sort of provisionary rules that but the NFL has done. I think that's been a good change, not just with special teams, but all across the board, to do a test trial to see if something works, put that balloon out there and see what comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing from a news standpoint I want to get to here before we dive a little bit more into OTAs and our observations. The Packers during training camp this year are going to be having joint practices with two different teams. Matt LaFleur has announced that for the first week of the preseason, when the Packers travel to Cincinnati, they will go a couple of days early and have one joint practice with the Bengals a couple of days before the game, then do the usual walkthrough the day before the game. The following week, when the New England Patriots are coming to Lambeau Field for a preseason game, there is a joint practice agreement of some kind, although the details and the schedule with regard to that have not been released. But we've seen this trend developing, and not just with the Packers, but with teams all across the league, Wes, that the more starters are not playing in the preseason because of injury risk, and the preseason games are about your roster evaluation for guys who are going to make the team or not make the team, and the starters are just going to rest and not take that risk. That joint practices in August, practicing against another team, against another defense, against another offense, in that controlled environment where the quarterback's not getting hit, where guys are going to, still take care of each other because it is just a practice. That's where things are going. And the Packers are now going to have joint practices in 2 different weeks in the preseason in 2023.
And this is the older I get, again, kind of like in the special teams side of things, I think this is the right way to go. I think we've seen a handful of these practices. Yes. The first one they did against the Houston Texans, wasn't great. Yeah. But over the years, especially like the Jets ones where you had Robert Saleh, Matt LaFleur, that friendship, some of the cohesiveness between the staffs, I thought they gave themselves really good work. I thought the practices last year with New Orleans were really good. The idea of Green Bay, the Packers leaving Green Bay to go down to Cincy for an extra day. When I first thought about it, I'm like, oh, wow, that's different. But, at the end of the day, we typically end up not seeing that last practice before a preseason game anyway. So I don't know how much really changes. It maybe takes one away that we normally, the public and the media would see, but to go up against a team like the Bengals with Joe Burrow and, Jamar Chase, seeing, Jair Alexander working against him, you're not going to see that in the preseason. No. So to have those opportunities, I think is really big. Certainly to see an old school mindset coach like Bill Belichick buying into this and wanted to make the trip over here. I think it says a lot in terms of where this league is headed, and the fact that these joint practices are probably going to become more commonplace. I would be really interested to see if this is the first time in franchise history the Packers have had 2 joint practices against another team, 2 separate teams in the same preseason exhibition season. I don't know if that ever happened, maybe in the 6, preseason game seasons. But the one thing I'll mention, this has nothing to do with your question, but because the question's going to keep coming up about Jordan Love and is he going to play in the preseason? Are the starters going to play? You know what I didn't realize, Mike, because I'm a couple years younger than you. Somebody asked
just a couple.
Somebody asked an insider inbox about how Steve Young did in his first couple of years replacing Joe Montana. I knew the story with Montana, the elbow injury that kept him out in 91. I did not realize that he suffered that elbow injury in the preseason. I didn't know that. That was something it took 35 years for me to realize. And there's been countless, in Green Bay, we always talk about Jordy Nelson in 15, but, in a 17 game season, the more I just wonder if the juice is not worth the squeeze in that regard to putting your guys out there, because the tangent there is, if you're putting Jordan Love out there, well, is David Bakhtiari practicing, or is he playing? Is Elgton Jenkins playing?
Right.
Those are really hard questions in scripted, somewhat vanilla game situations. Well, in these joint practices, you can actually throw the book at the opponent a little bit more, kind of a handshake agreement, so show some of your stuff. It's probably not a great answer in terms of what the NFL wants and keeping, people going to preseason games, but the more time that passes, the more I'm sold now on these training camp joint sessions.
Well, you just look at the number of reps too, because in the day when the starters did play in the preseason, there would maybe be one game in the preseason where the starters would play a whole half, and otherwise these other preseason games they were playing 1 series or 2 series. Well, those games, what's 1 series, 2 series? Maybe 8 snaps, 10 snaps, maybe a dozen. You play a joint practice against another team, whereas you say the Bengals with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to go up against the Packers defense, Jair Alexander and Preston Smith on the other side. You can go 11 on 11 in a practice. They might go 25, 30 snaps against each other, in a controlled environment, in a relatively short amount of time. And it helps with the, the looks as well as the conditioning and everything that you're supposed to get out of training camp. So it's not a surprise that things are trending this way in the NFL. And who knows, we may get to the day, Wes, where with these 3 preseason games, where every preseason week, whether you're at home or on the road, the team is going to go early and practice once or twice, in a joint practice against the other team. That will just be part of how training camps and preseason schedules are built. It may get to that point, because the Packers now already are at 2 out of 3 with just the 3 preseason games on the slate.
A couple other things to touch on really quickly before we look some more at OTAs. First and foremost, family night has now been announced, August 5th.
Yes.
Can bring your family, your friends, your fireworks, all of that good stuff.
Well,
as Larry McCarron would say.
Leave the fireworks in the
leave your
lot.
fireworks. We'll have the fireworks. You
the
at home.
Stadium has its own.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But family night, always neat to see that tradition. But did you notice something last week that I thought was very interesting that Matt LaFleur said as we start to transition into OTAs from all this? The call it periods in practice. They also made the switch. So we're not doing installs all 4 practices. It's not a new install. They're doing basically 2 per week. And within those installs and within those 2-minute drills, they're doing call it periods, kind of mixing it up a little bit. Obviously it's everything that they're doing is installed. They're not just calling it off the dirt, but does that remind you at all about the end of training camp last year when Aaron Rodgers was talking about, how much he enjoyed those final practices because he didn't have the last preseason game? They did a little bit more unscripted stuff.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that's something that's getting more incorporated into this thing. And I just wonder again, as teams look to maximize their amount of time that they get with these guys every day. It's very, I feel like you and I are watching an evolution of how teams are preparing, not just Green Bay, but in general, and what the NFL is doing to sort of tailor itself now to this post, 2 player safety heavy CBAs to make sure that you get the most out of your preparation.
Yeah, and just to explain a little further for those who might not be familiar with what a call it period is in practice. Traditionally, when teams are installing their playbook, you have a series of installations, where each practice you're installing certain segments of the playbook. Maybe it's one install or two installs in a given practice, but the plays that are going to be run essentially are scripted ahead of time, and the players actually have a chance, at least the ones that are putting in their time off the field, certainly the young players who don't know the playbook very well, they have a chance the night before, the morning of, whatever, to go over all of those plays that they would potentially be running in practice the next day, and to really get, the mental part down, the assignments down, all of that kind of stuff. What Matt LaFleur has done this year for the first time in OTAs is part of the installation of the playbook. It's not just scripting all the plays. Okay, here's the 15 plays of this installation that we're going to run in practice tomorrow. It's like, okay, here's the installation. Here are the various concepts and here are the various plays. But then when they walk out on the practice field, he's calling a play into Jordan Love's helmet or into Sean Clifford's helmet and saying, okay, this is what we're going to run. And then the players have to draw on their knowledge that, okay, this is what I remember of this play. Now I got to go out and run it. They didn't have that extra preparation time in advance, knowing that play was going to be run in the practice. So there's certainly a balance point there when you're dealing with a lot of young players. The Packers have a lot of young wide receivers, young tight ends, all of that, and a lot of young linemen with the 2s and 3s, certainly trying to work their way into things. So there's a balancing act there in terms of getting the young guys to learn the playbook, but also testing them and finding out, what is it that, how do these guys think on their feet and react? Because when it comes to, September, week 1, week 2, and the Packers are going to be counting on these young guys to do some things. The coaching staff can't be standing there on the sidelines wondering, well, is this guy going to be able to handle it or not? They've got to find out. And they're trying to find out even a little bit earlier than in the past, instead of waiting for training camp. They're doing it more here during OTAs. One last thing also on family night, tickets for family night will go on sale Thursday, June 29th, $10 a piece. So for those who take part in that wonderful annual summer tradition at Lambeau Field,
no better deal
to see the Green Bay Packers and to see Lambeau Field. $10 get you in the door and get you a pretty up close seat to what normally is a pretty entertaining practice, as long as the weather cooperates, which doesn't always happen on that particular evening. So I will get to some sponsor business here, Wes. Before I forget, though, I have a couple other topics I want to get to. But Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, you brought up their names just a little bit ago, David Bakhtiari and Elgton Jenkins, talking about, okay, what are going to be the decisions as to whether or not they play in the preseason? How does that impact Jordan Love? We spoke with both Bakhtiari and Jenkins in the locker room after last week's open locker room session following the practice that was open to the media. And Elgton Jenkins came right out and said it. He said, he's talked to Dave. Their goal is at left guard, left tackle. Their goal is to be the best left side in the NFL. And certainly when you're talking about a guy who's had 5 all-pro selections at left tackle, multiple first team, multiple second team, all-pro selections in Bakhtiari, and then a guy like Jenkins at left guard who has been named to a Pro Bowl and then also played obviously various other positions along the line. But you get the sense, Wes, that the goal here, as much as Elgton Jenkins has helped out this offensive line through a lot of injury situations with moving around and everything else, the goal here in 2023 is to have David Bakhtiari and Elgton Jenkins lining up side by side on the left side absolutely as often as possible for Jordan Love here, because that is what is going to help this Packers offense really make this transition to a new quarterback.
It feels like to me, Mike, like your favorite band getting back together, right? Like the reunion tour, the Blink-182 reunion tour here. Because while there wasn't a separation by any means, obviously Bakhtiari and Jenkins kind of went their own directions, and a lot of that had to do with injuries. But I felt like the Packers finally started to find some answers with their offensive line during the final month of that season after, well, sandwiched in between was the appendectomy, because obviously you have to just throw an emergency appendectomy in there.
Right. Right when things were starting to settle down and they were going to start lining up next to each other, then David Bakhtiari has an appendectomy. Interesting, though, I'll throw this statistic at you and then I'll let you continue. I actually look back because of Bakhtiari hurting his knee at the end of 2020. And then obviously November of 21, Elgton Jenkins has his knee injury. Bakhtiari has complications with his return, and then ends up having the appendectomy and everything last year. If I did the research correctly, including playoffs, the Packers' last 38 football games, Bakhtiari and Jenkins have lined up side by side on the left side only 6 times in 38 games. And when you think about how important those two players are to this Packers offense being at its best, no matter who the quarterback is, and just the continuity that can provide, if those two guys, two of the best in the business at those spots, left tackle and left guard, if they can be side by side on a weekly basis, how much of a difference that makes, and how for the last 38 games, only 6 times in 38 games, it's kind of hard to fathom that those numbers are what they are.
Well, and just how freaking good they were next to each other in 19 and 20. 19 was a situation where it wasn't even looking like that was going to be the original arrangement, because Lane Taylor had made his way back, from his injuries. It was going to step in there, but that's the direction it had to go. And Jenkins proved to be just a revelation at that spot. Yeah. I give so much credit to Elgton, because no matter where you put him, he always stood up. He stood in and really stepped up. But we got to remember that this guy is a 2-time Pro Bowler at left guard. And I think, in my opinion, when he's healthy, he's the best left guard in the National Football League. Could he play something else down the line? Sure. But right now you have a 5-time All-Pro left tackle that is healthy again. A guy that still has potential Hall of Fame possibilities in David Bakhtiari. Being able to work those guys together, I think that was one of the reasons why Jenkins grew as quickly as he did in this offense, being able to be between Bakhtiari and another All-Pro and Corey Linsley. And now those two are going to become sort of the stalwarts on this thing, as things we try to figure out what gets worked out to their east. Everything, I think, is pointing up for them right now. The other aspect of it I like too, and this is where the Packers are going to have to figure out what the plan is for David Bakhtiari, with how much he practices, how much he plays, because I look at him in a lot of ways as like a level 100 Pokemon, where if you ever played the video game, a guy gets to a certain level, and I know they always say you can improve and whatnot, but realistically, we know what David Bakhtiari is going to give you if you get him to Sunday. How do we get him full health, full stamina to those markers? That's what I want to see, because I felt like in the second half of the year, once we got past that Washington game and a little bit of a hiccup and a really weird day in Detroit, that's what they were able to do. And that Thursday night turnaround, Mike, as I wrote in the story that I put together on Monday, when you think back to the fact that the Packers, they needed to start winning some games there, and David stepped up and played on 4 days rest in that game against the Titans. That was what showed me, okay, they figured something out here. And if you get that piece worked out, then things start to settle in with, okay, where is Josh Nijman working? Where is Zach Tom working? Is John Runyon going to stick in there at right guard? That everything, when you look at the possibilities off on the offensive line, starts with having David Bakhtiari and Elgton Jenkins available and healthy on the left side.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's going on the right side will certainly be a story to watch all throughout training camp, especially after the pads go on, in terms of, where is Zach Tom competing? You mentioned John Runyon. Is he going to, stay entrenched there at right guard, or is anything going to happen there? And then with Josh Myers entering his 3rd season at center, although, as Luke Butkus pointed out, I mean, Josh Myers only played a handful of games as a rookie. So last year wasn't really year 2 for him. It was more like year 1.5. So this is sort of like year 2.5 for Josh Myers. And there are a lot of expectations there for him, as well as the rest of that offensive line sorts itself out. So one other topic I want to get to before we go today, and it has to do with the rookie receiver Romeo Doubs. He was another player that spoke, and to his credit, he's often available at his locker and is very accommodating to the media with all the questions that want to be asked about the rookie wide receivers. But we saw something in practice, the one practice we got to see last week. There was a 2-minute drill at the end of practice. Jordan Love, I believe, completed either 6 or 7 passes on that drive to get the offense down into field goal range. 4 of those completions went to number 87, went to Romeo Doubs. And I don't want to make too much of it. It was one practice. It was 1 2-minute drill. But we know that those two guys have worked a little bit together in the offseason, away from Green Bay. And then with what we saw with 4 catches in 1 2-minute drill, there's definitely a chemistry developing between Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see just where this goes between those two guys, because you can hear when either one of them talks, you can hear the excitement in their voice as far as where this might be headed and their opportunity to work together in Green Bay.
I just love watching Romeo Doubs play the game of football. The fact is, Mike, Christian Watson's going to probably over the long haul here, if he stays healthy, he's going to get a lot of the national recognition and accolades. His size, his speed. I mean, he's a walking Sports Center top 10, right? I mean, I think the 10 longest plays last year for the Packers, I think he had 5 or 6 of them, and he played in like half the games. So we understand there's a reason why Christian Watson was drafted where he was and why a lot of people thought he could have potentially been a first-round pick. But Romeo Doubs is the type of player that you win with, because I think he could be just as productive in the National Football League. I think he's an absolute magnet to the football. But you know what you said there, and it just brings me back, and I wrote about it in Inbox last week too, about, it was just one practice, just 1 2-minute drill, but by golly, when he's healthy, this is all this kid does. It's all he does, Mike. The only time we've seen Romeo Doubs kind of have a hiccup was when he was coming off of that ankle injury.
Yep.
Couple drops here and there, but by and large, man, this guy last year, every single practice, we kept putting that same qualifier on him. 1 practice, 1 OTA, 1 offseason program, 1 training camp practice, 1 preseason game. And he just kept stacking. And what does that tell you, Mike? Well, it tells you that the quarterback that was throwing to him during a lot of those offseason practices, the quarterback that was throwing to him in those preseason games was Jordan Love. And as Jordan Love gets his comfort level in this offense, I think there really is something to be said for the fact that he's already developed the rapport that he has with Doubs, with Samori Toure. Christian Watson missed a lot of camp last year with the knee thing, but the fact is that these young guys that came in last year, they got to rep a lot with Jordan Love. And I think when you're seeing some of these team periods now with these now second-year receivers, you can tell that there's a chemistry and a bond that has sort of been forged in those settings that now we're going to have a chance to see sort of translate on game days.
Yeah, and I thought I pressed Doubs a little bit with regard to that comeback from the injury and sort of what he learned, and his perspective on it was really interesting, because he admitted like it was really tough, and he knows that when he came back after missing a month, and that was a nasty ankle injury from in essence he missed 5 games because it happened on the first offensive play in Detroit. He messes up the ankle, he misses that game and the next 4 before he comes back. But we also saw he wasn't the same player when he came back from that. And I think that's something that stuck with him a little bit. And he appreciates, looking back at it now, it wasn't fun. It was difficult to go through, but he appreciates the fact that he had to work through something that significant as a rookie when, he was off to a really good start. His arrow is pointing up. Things are going great. He has a major setback as a rookie with the injury. And then he comes back and he's not able to quite get back to the player that he was. That's something that can provide a lot of fuel and really a solid foundation for a guy like Romeo Doubs going into year 2, because there is nobody. There isn't a young player. I shouldn't say nobody, but it's been a long time since I've talked to a young player in the locker room with a lot of expectations put on him and a lot of early success and everything that we've been talking about, who is so self-aware. He doesn't, there's nothing phony about this young man. Everything he says is absolutely genuine. He's very, very introspective. and he wants to be as honest and forthright in answering the questions as possible. And it's how he carries himself. What he went through as a rookie, both the positives and the negatives, I think provide a foundation for a young man who's going to have a really, really good career in the NFL.
That's an excellent point. Something I hadn't really thought about, because when you think about his last 2 years at Nevada, I mean, he was just a world burner, right? I mean, the guy has 1,000-yard seasons, touchdowns after touchdown. I mean, he was the Wolfpack's offense a lot of times, and certainly the passing game aspect of it. So here he is. He hits the ground running. He's the NFL Offensive Player of the Week 3 weeks into his career, rookie Offensive Player of the Week. And next thing you know, it looks like he's just skyrocketing. Hey, maybe this guy will be, better than Christian Watson. Those debates started. And then he has the ankle injury in Detroit. Fortunately for the Packers, they only have to play in Detroit once a year. So hopefully you hope that you can get through that, trap and, continue on. But I think in a lot of ways it can be positive, because it is now kind of telling Romeo Doubs, this is what adversity looks like. And it's what it looks like at this level, because I think one thing that I've started to learn more and appreciate is that difference between like injured and hurt, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, hey, okay, you were out for 4 weeks and now you're back and now you're 100% again. I doubt Romeo Doubs was 100% the rest of the season with the foot.
No way.
So, or with the ankle. So it's like that. I learned so much from that in 2015 with Devontae and how that can affect you. And you and I were talking with some readers last week about the footwork of, Jordan Love. It translates at every position. It starts from the bottom and works its way up, and how you're able to play the game. So I'm just really excited for it, because I feel like as much as we've talked about and beaten the whole, hey, do they need a veteran receiver? The thing I keep coming back to is, as long as they're healthy, I want Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs on the field as much as possible. And beyond them, you have 5 other draft picks that could potentially be in that conversation as well. So the options are limitless. And as Romeo Doubs keeps proving, no matter what the challenge is, even for a second-year player, he continues to meet that standard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun to watch with that entire receiver group, but certainly with all the attention that's going to be paid to Christian Watson, the foundation that Romeo Doubs got as a rookie in this offense, and now the rapport he's developing with Jordan Love, it'll be fun to watch.
You ever talk to a player like Romeo Doubs? Can you think of one that you've talked to?
I mean, been in that locker room for a lot of years, and he's
a one-on-one.
Yeah, he is. He just the way he addresses questions. I even mentioned in Insider Inbox, he has a way of being honest and revealing, but also very protective of certain details at the same time. He can give you a really good answer to a question and you really appreciate the answer, and then you walk away kind of going like, oh, I wish I knew more. Like, I want to know more. And he doesn't quite give you, and you have to respect that. The players
100%.
Players are not obligated to share every detail, in answering, every question about trials and tribulations that they've gone through. But he gives very, very good answers, but he does leave you wanting more, because you always feel like there's a little bit more to the story that he's keeping to himself, and you respect that. And then you pay attention and see where it goes.
I don't know what the antonym is for like a cliche, but that's him. Like, he's so genuine in how he answers things. But at the same time, it's not like he's just sitting at his locker with the lights on him with his big smile and, and like, hey, everyone come talk to me. He sits in his locker. People come talk to him. He always says yes. He stands up, he's very thoughtful, has his arms crossed, usually like this. And usually a smile will peek out, but it's not like he's like this extremely extroverted. I've never covered anyone like Romeo Doubs, for real. Yeah. Like, he's like, there's so many of these guys that it's like, they kind of fit into a certain area, and not saying if you're extroverted, that's a bad thing. That's a great thing. We appreciate it as writers, but like, he just defies a lot of different laws. And it's been really fun to cover him.
He certainly defies some conventions, but it's
conventions.
But he's very refreshing. He's very refreshing and very introspective and interesting to listen to at the same time.
And I felt really bad because, like, at one point last year, I remember talking to somebody in the locker room, like, man, Romeo's talking like every day. Now,
I know it's like, when's he gonna get worn out? Right. It's like we try to pick our spots. And but yeah, it seems like it seems like sometimes maybe he does need to say no, just so he can give himself a break. But
he's just really super chill guy. I've enjoyed covering them so far.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Well, with that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. One more week of OTAs, mandatory minicamp. Next week, we'll have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.